Well, first off, let me tell you, thank you for sending me a bio that actually had the correct pronunciation of your last name, because I was afraid I would make a faux pas.
That's good.
Welcome to the Doctor's Mentor Show. If you believe that medicine is an industry and not a profession, if you enjoy submitting complex reimbursement claims, or you would do another residency just for fun, be advised, you're about to be offended. You should probably leave now.
All this talk about mentoring doctors is ridiculous. I thought doctors learned to do everything better than everyone else the first year of medical school. At least that's the way they act.
If you love assisting patients with vitality breakthroughs, if the right to practice medicine without interference is important, and you want expert tips for practice freedom and profits to support your epic life, welcome aboard and prepare to be blown away. The Doctor's Mentor Show starts now. Here's your host, Dr. Lori Barr.
So excited to bring to you the voice, the physician voice in social media, the leading physician voice in social media. If you are anywhere on the internet and you have heard from a physician, then you already know who I'm talking about. Yes, my guest today is Dr. Kevin Poe. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Kevin. He is a Boston guy, practices in New Hampshire, is an amazing icon in medicine, and he's really smashing the stereotypes for outsiders who are looking at physicians, and also our physician stereotypes about social media. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is all about how Kevin got involved in social media and how it changed his career, and how you can be a voice too, and how you can leverage your voice.
Today's topic:
legacy.
All right, Lori, thanks for that intro. I don't know how I can top that.
Well, first off, let me tell you, thank you for sending me a bio that actually had the correct pronunciation of your last name, because I was afraid I would make a faux pas.
That's good. No, I've learned from all these years to really have that pronunciation, because otherwise I get faux, some people say po, so I definitely want to make that clear.
Awesome. And that's so important when you're actually starting to brand yourself. The worst thing that could happen is to brand yourself incorrectly, either by name or reputation. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. One of the things that I talk to other doctors, when it comes to building a brand, it has to be a consistent brand across the board.
So speaking about consistency, what ways do you see physicians being inconsistent with the way they present themselves on social media, if they present themselves at all?
Well, I think that's the thing, right? If they present themselves at all. I talk to a lot of doctors on social media, and whenever they hear about social media, it's always from a negative perspective, right? They always hear from their risk managers at the hospital about how other doctors are getting fired because they're posting pictures on Instagram or Facebook. So one of the things that I try to talk to whenever I talk to physicians about social media is a more positive perspective about how social media can be used to connect with and educate patients, define our online reputation, and of course have a voice, because that's tremendously important as healthcare reform is bubbling around us. So getting physicians on social media, I think, really is the key. And then once they get on, that's really the biggest leap. And in terms of maintaining a consistent brand, whether you're talking about a blog, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, those are all semantics and things that can be worked out. But getting physicians on and convincing them about the positive aspects of social media really is the biggest step that I have to deal with.
Now, before a physician runs out there and starts, going wild on Instagram or Snapchat or something, are there some considerations they need to take into account before they start establishing their personal brand? Were there any obstacles you had to overcome when you first started getting into this?
Sure. I think the biggest decision a physician has to make is why they want to go into social media. A lot of times when doctors hear about social media, they always say, I have to get on Facebook, Twitter. I have to start a blog. I have to start these videos, and it all becomes overwhelming. So I always start with a goal first. Why does a doctor want to go on social media? Is it to educate patients? Is it to promote their practice? Is it to manage their online reputation? Do they want to advocate for a cause or speak up about healthcare reform? So they need to start with the why first. And once they start with that why, then there are social media tools that can adapt to any of those reasons. If they want to educate patients, I think Facebook or having a blog is great. I think, of course, video is great. And if they want to speak out about social media, then I think that writing a blog or even going on Twitter and engaging in that discourse, I think that's fantastic as well. But before they jump on, they need to start with why first.
So what was your why?
So one of the reasons why I didn't take my own advice. I started with social media back in 2004. And at that time, there were only a handful of doctors on social media. And I had a blog. I think I was talking to my brother-in-law. He said, you always have these opinions on medicine and healthcare. You should start a blog and share your thoughts. So I started something on Blogger, and it's still around, Google's free blogging site. And I remember around that time, there was a drug recall, Vioxx, and a lot of patients were on that drug, and they were in a panic.
Super scared.
Vioxx.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote a blog post about what to do if you're on Vioxx, the questions you could ask your doctor. And I remember the next day I walked into the exam room, and that patient actually read my blog post. He said, I read your posts. I was comforted by what you had to say, and now I have all this information that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So, and that's when I realized, that was my aha moment, saying, hey, we can educate patients, we can connect with patients outside of the exam room. Instead of talking one-to-one with patients, we can talk one to many with patients. And of course, it's snowballed since then. Now we not only have blogs, but we also have video, we have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have LinkedIn. We have so many different tools that are out there where we can build that platform and really be heard. It's tremendously empowering and it's tremendously powerful.
Absolutely. Now, were you in a practice setting where you could set your own rules about what you posted, or were you in a more controlled environment where there were other rules that you needed to be aware of before you started
Sure.
opinions?
So one of the things that I wanted to be sure that I want to separate my personal brand, the Kevin MD brand, from my practice, because I didn't want to speak with the voice of my hospital, my practice. So I made it clear that my opinions are my own. And in fact, I really had no cross-branding between me and my hospital, me and my practice on my site. So there's that clear separation that's there. And over time, they've certainly come to respect that. And now they even see the advantages of it, because I've been involved with social media since 2004. That's 13 years now. And I have a pretty powerful online brand, and I use it to bring in patients. Because if someone is looking for a physician in Nashua, New Hampshire, for instance, where I practice, I have a page on my blog that comes up, and I use all that Google juice that I've built up over the years, all that leverage that I've had online. And now patients can find me on the web because of what I've done since 2004. You asked me earlier about what are the biggest obstacles in terms of having a brand. I think that is one of them, in terms of maintaining a practice while having a brand outside the practice. Because you see a lot of doctors online, and they're one or the other, right? You have an online physician, and that's all they do. But then you have doctors who see patients, and that's all they do. And I didn't want to be the doctor who did not see patients. I didn't want to be the media personality, the doctor in name only. I wanted to be a physician that can see patients, but also have a platform online. And that, I think, is really one of the biggest challenges, for the obvious reason of time. But in terms of managing all my professional energy, how much energy should I spend on my patients versus on Kevin MD? That's still something I struggle with. And when you ask me what the biggest obstacle is, I think that's clearly one of the biggest obstacles, not only I have, but physicians have as well.
So what I hear you saying is that it was really important to you, just like me. I want to practice radiology, and yet I also have a personal brand, and I don't want to enmesh the two. It's two separate things, and I'm very clear on all my social media platforms about that as well. And that has worked for you. I know that in academics particularly, or if you hold a hospital contract, you may need to check and see if there are items in the employee contract that might not even be in your own agreement, but might be in the employee handbook that have guidelines for what you can post. Or at least you need to have a disclaimer that says, what I think has nothing to do with this academic affiliation.
Yeah. And that's absolutely critical because when you're online, when you're in the public, you represent the organization you work for as well, even if you have that clear lines of separation. And I talk to doctors all the time about this, and I warn them they need to be familiar with their organization's social media guidelines, because whatever they say online not only represents themselves but their organization as well, and that is intertwined. And for the most part, doctors they abide by that, but sometimes they don't, right? So what seems to be common sense isn't always common sense to a lot of doctors. So that needs to be stated explicitly, is that they do represent the organization they work for as well, if they want to maintain a hand in both worlds.
And so how do you deal with that? Like, do you run every post by an attorney, or what works for knowing, or what would you advise? Like, if I was in your one-on-one coaching program, that I know you have a highly successful one-on-one physician coaching program, what would you be telling me as far as how to make sure my media posts were going to be okay with the hospital? Do I run it by their attorneys? Do I run it by my own attorney? How does that work?
Well, I think every hospital is different, obviously, in terms of the spectrum of how conservative the hospital is. So those are definitely individual situations. You certainly do want to make your hospital aware of what you're doing, and my hospital is aware of what I'm doing. In my particular case, I don't generate a huge amount of content like I used to. I have a collection of thousands of healthcare voices that share their own stories, that share their own opinions and articles. So they're not necessarily written by me. But I do have a pretty comprehensive disclaimer in terms of use agreement that I've had a healthcare lawyer write up for me way back when, that really goes through all the scenarios in terms of what I personally am liable for, or what my hospital is personally liable for. So you do want to protect yourself with an ironclad disclaimer in terms of use. You want to have your own attorney, but you also want to clear it with your workplace in terms and make sure that it's okay with them as well. So to answer your question specifically, I don't clear every post with my attorney or with the hospital's attorney. I've been doing this for a long time, so I know what works and what doesn't, and so far that's kept me out of trouble. But I definitely recommend every physician who wants to have that online platform to really have an attorney handy and really create that ironclad disclaimer that can keep you out of trouble.
And also having some way to keep that up to date. Like, FTC guidelines change, and especially if you're making claims about what happens in your practice, you need to be aware of those guidelines for advertising online, and make sure you are abiding by those guidelines, or you will get shut down and fined. So again, some way to keep that intact. I mean, it's great to look at what somebody else is doing and start there, but definitely don't leave this to LegalZoom. This is a very refined area of healthcare. Legal
and
it's
constantly evolving, changing. As you said, it's constantly evolving, especially when it comes to healthcare. I always say that things are always 3 to 5 years behind the times in healthcare, and what's new in other industries, healthcare is just taking baby steps in. So always update your legal situation whenever you have a platform.
Now, two things I want to explore a little more. One is online media reputation management. And I know you've co-authored a book on this, and you are absolutely an expert at this. What mistakes do you see, that we haven't already covered? What other mistakes do you see physicians making that really, they step on their own toes as far as reputation management online?
Sure. So, whenever we talk about reputation management, it's always about these physician rating sites. And that's really the biggest anxiety that I see a lot of doctors have. When you Google their name, for instance, I tell a lot of doctors don't Google their name, but I tell them you got to Google your name because that's what patients are doing. So when they Google their name and they see a review site come up, they see like a 3-star or a 1-star review from a patient, and they get all anxious because patients are rating doctors online. It's a fact of life. They rate everything else online, and they're going to rate their doctors. Almost half of patients, they go online to research their doctor using these type of rating sites. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see is that doctors take it so personally, and they have a visceral reaction to it. They want to like fire back. They want to clear the air. And I think that's the biggest mistake. You don't want to get into an online argument with a particular patient. You don't want to get into an online argument really with anybody, because chances are that online argument is never going to end up well. And when you have an online argument with a patient that you see, that violates HIPAA, and whatever you write online, it stays online, and it's a negative reflection of you as well. So that's the biggest piece of advice that I give the physicians is whenever they read something negative about themselves, take a deep breath before they hit enter. Better yet, don't even respond online. You want to take that conversation offline, perhaps call the patient with a phone call, or set up a meeting with the patient, or have the patient call the clinic so to clear up any misunderstandings. But one thing that they should never do is really get into a back and forth online with a patient, because that's nothing good can ever happen from that.
Now, I have seen people respond or have their office respond with a statement that says just that. We have invited this patient to meet with us to resolve this issue. Yeah. Something like that. Is that acceptable?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a general statement like that, and you want to even make it more general. You don't want to acknowledge that patient's even part of your practice, because if you say something that that confirms that the patient is that you've seen the patient or patient's part of your practice, that violates HIPAA too. So you go to TripAdvisor, see the hotels, and they have these very general boilerplate responses, something like, thank you for your response, please call the clinic and we'll be happy to discuss that with you. So something like that where you don't acknowledge that the patient is part of your clinic, I think that's perfectly acceptable. And in fact, that's what I recommend, because it lets the patient know that they're being heard, and it gives them a course of action in case they want to clear up any misunderstanding. So what you said is exactly what I recommend.
So you've given the patient a chance to know that you know what they're feeling, because that's what they've expressed, and you've heard it, seen it, felt it. You've given them an avenue to get their needs met offline, and you've shown them that you're protecting their privacy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think and I think that's the best. A lot of doctors may think that's not enough, but I think that's the best that we can expect in our current environment.
That makes total sense. Now, your Kevin MD site is a very, very mature site, and you've got thousands of physician contributors and other healthcare professional contributors. You've got sponsorships for the site. It's very mature. How long did it take you to go from a steadily producing blog site, that you were producing content on? What were the steps that made it go from that, where you started on Blogger, say, to where you are today? And what was that timeline like?
Yeah. So we're talking years. When it comes to building an audience, a lot of people ask me, or whenever I coach doctors, one of the first questions they ask me is, how can I get more readers? And I can say definitively that there is no magic bullet. Gaining a following, gaining readership is a series of incremental changes. And in terms of sponsorships and advertising, a lot of physicians also ask me, how can I make money from this, right? So I think that, again, it takes years to build an audience, and it is a grind. When I talk about series of incremental changes, and in addition to that, you have to pound the pavement every day. This can't be a fad. This has to be a long-term view. So you have to build an audience first. You can't go into building a platform thinking dollars and advertising first. Once you build an audience and once you have a loyal following, chances are the sponsors and advertisers will come to you, because as physicians or in a medical profession, we have a desirable audience. There are a lot of sponsors who want to reach physicians specifically. And if you have that platform where doctors can come to, if you have a platform that physicians trust, then sponsors will follow. But all the energy that I do and all the energy that a lot of physicians should be spent on building that audience. And we're talking a matter of years.
And what, in your opinion, is a respectable audience size?
I don't know if I have a specific number. I think it depends on what your target audience is. Obviously, I have a pretty big target audience. It's pretty much anyone in healthcare. So, I have, millions of page views a month. But there are niche physician bloggers who target specific specialties. There are cardiology bloggers, there are electrophysiology bloggers, there are nephrology bloggers, and those are much smaller audience, and they may not need an audience that's bigger than that. So I don't know if I can give a specific number. I think it depends on what the target is, and it depends on how niche your content is.
Okay. So then how does a physician measure success in going down this path?
Again, depends on their goals. Is the goal making money? Is the goal to be heard? Is the goal to get a book deal? Is the goal to connect with mainstream media? So I think there are a lot of measures of success. It depends on what you want to start out with. So for me specifically, it does cost in the 5 figures to run the site. So I think that having a sponsor, I'm partnered with MedPage today, and they help cover the cost of the site. And of course, I want to be compensated for the time that I spend. I spend anywhere from 30 to 40 hours a week managing the site and curating the blog. So of course, I'm being compensated for that. But then there are some physicians who don't necessarily have that as a first priority. They want to really just get their voice heard. They want to write and have an audience and perhaps connect with mainstream media. And I've had authors on my site get book deals because they have editors, they have newspaper reporters, they have television producers who read my site and they ask me for their contact. And now they have platforms in things like Washington Post and the Boston Globe because of a small article or a story that they posted on Kevin MD. So really acting as a conduit between social media and mainstream media, I think that also could be a measure of success. So I think it really depends on why that physician is going into platform building. What's their ultimate goal? And I think it depends on, there are a lot of measures that can measure that goal.
Now, earlier you mentioned activity management, and just now you mentioned that you spend 30 to 40 hours a week managing the site. Some people would consider that a full-time job, yet you still see patients. So you're a board certified internist. Do you think there's any, are there some medical specialties that just don't lend themselves to being productive as a social media change agent?
Well, it depends on what the commitment is. I'm an internal medicine physician. I practice primary care. So I think by nature, there is some flexibility there. I probably wouldn't see a lot of general surgeons, for instance. I don't see a lot of part-time general surgeons doing this part-time. So I think you do need to have some type of job flexibility if their ultimate goal is to have a platform and still see patients. I think it's important to do both because I have that credibility of seeing patients. So I have the credibility with my physician colleagues that I am still a practicing primary care doctor, and that is important to me. So that's something I never want to give up. I do see patients 3.5 days a week, part-time, and it's something I do enjoy doing. And also, I want to segue into things like physician burnout. I think that obviously is a big topic on my own site. And I think if I was doing primary care internal medicine full-time, I don't know how long I'd last. I think it's impossible to practice primary care full-time these days. So having that outlet, even though it's 34 hours a week, having that passion outside of medicine, I think it's something that keeps me going in medicine, if that makes sense. So having a passion outside of medicine keeps me strong in medicine. So having that dual passions is what keeps me going in both.
So to be clear, even though you're saying it's a passion outside of medicine, it's still in the realm of medicine and healthcare.
Yeah, outside of clinical medicine.
It's just outside of clinical care.
outside of clinical care.
And what I hear you saying is that this fuels your passion. And the reason it does, I mean, you've shared with me your personal mission. It's to help physicians use social media to make a difference in healthcare. And that is a big, that's not even that's not the theme for a blog site. That's a movement, because healthcare is dynamic and it's changing, and physicians can either be part of that change and shape it, or we can sit down and be impacted by the change. And I see you as someone who is really empowering physicians to be more active in shaping that change. Am I reading you right?
No, that is completely true, because I don't need to tell you or your audience that healthcare is changing as we speak. And my personal opinion is that physicians need to be leading that charge.
Yep.
Too often, we're either too busy seeing patients, we're drowning under meaningful use, we're spending over half of our time behind a computer doing patient charts, and a lot of us don't have the time to take on that advocacy role. But if physicians don't do it, who does? It's the politicians. It's the clinicians who don't see patients. It's the healthcare administrators. And their decisions, even though they don't see patients, they're not in the proverbial trenches, their decisions affect us. And I think it's a moral imperative that physicians really speak up when it comes to healthcare reform. And it doesn't matter politically where they stand. I think they need to be an active part, whether it's a progressive stance or a conservative stance. I think that physicians need to speak up and be involved in healthcare reform, because if they aren't, then other people are going to make those decisions for us.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And one thing I know that's important to you is really making sure that physicians understand how important it is to be social media savvy. How long do you think it takes to get savvy about social media?
Well, it depends on how regular they do it, but I think I always start with the approach by listening first. They don't necessarily have to start a channel on YouTube and do videos or do podcast shows like yourself or write blog posts. I always start by listening, baby steps. Go on Twitter, follow. I have a list of essential physician feeds that I recommend, and just follow me or follow other physicians. Just listen to what they have to say, and maybe take a few weeks doing that and learning the etiquette on Twitter. And then once you get more comfortable with that, you can perhaps share interesting and relevant health posts. It could be an educational post. It could be something about how you envision healthcare going. And you could share those posts or like a post or on Twitter or Facebook. And then once you have a few weeks doing that and you get more comfortable, then maybe you can write your own post, perhaps writing something on Facebook, like a Facebook note. You could even perhaps even start a blog and start creating that content. So I think it definitely should be a gradual process. If I were to put a number on it, I would say anywhere from 3 to 6 months, just ballparking it. If you do it more intensely, of course, it could be sooner than that, but a few months getting your feet wet, knowing what the etiquette is, knowing what to do to stay out of trouble. I think it's definitely prudent, because as physicians, we mentioned before that we are held to a higher standard online, and what we say online does impact our livelihood. So I do recommend physicians going slow when it comes to the various social media options out there.
And if even Twitter or one of these, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, if these are too intimidating for a physician, you can even start in a physician's only world, such as Doximity, Figure One. Some of the medical specialties have their own online platforms. Like I know the Radiological Society of North America has its own platform where you can, it's almost like you're doing everything you would on a normal social media site, but you're insulated because you're surrounded by your peers.
Yep.
So that can be a good place to play and learn before you get out there swimming in the wild open ocean online.
I think that's a great point. Doximity, you mentioned that. I think that's a great site. Everyone should have a profile on Doximity because that profile gets ranked high normally on Google searches. And they also cross-post that profile with U.S. News and World Report. So it's almost like getting two profiles for the price of one. But these type of closed gate systems where you're interacting only with physicians and not in the public, Sermo is another one. I think that's another option that physicians have when it comes to testing the online waters.
And if you're if you're academically inclined, ResearchGate is another great place. I mean, it's not just physicians, it's scientists.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a huge population of physicians there. And again, you post your articles, you've got your resume up there, your CV, you get interaction about your work, you get questions about the research you're doing. It's really an awesome site.
Oh.
So you can play within medicine.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's say that a physician is older. And Kevin, I have no idea how old you are. You look like you're like 18. Okay.
You're very generous.
But let's say you're 45 and, you're a mom or a dad and you definitely are connecting with your family on Facebook and doing that sort of thing. And you're absolutely scared to death of professional on social media because there might be stalkers out there after your kids or, your medical malpractice company has just sent out a mailing saying how dangerous social media is. Is there anything different if you're in the older demographic of physicians that you would recommend to get started? Or do we just hang out with the med students? What do we do?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because I do talk to a lot of medical students, and of course they've used social media since they were babies. And the issue I have with them is that they need to harness that social media energy and channel it through a professional lens. And then you have the other end where people are just getting on email, and that sometimes is overwhelming and they don't see the benefits of social media. So you're right. I think that there is a little bit of a generation gap there. The point that seems to resonate more with the older generation of physicians is the online reputation piece. And, when I give them the statistics about how often patients are Googling their doctors, it's really an eye-opener for them. So I don't approach them with, advocacy, healthcare reform, rah-rah, go physicians, because that doesn't really resonate with them. But what gets their foot in the door is really the online reputation piece, because if they are not proactive in terms of the content that comes up when patients Google them, other sites are going to step into that. I always tell doctors that even though you don't want an online reputation, you have one already, because you have Rate MDs, you have health grades, you have vitals, and these sites create profiles of every single doctor in the United States, whether those doctors want a profile or not, right? And a lot of physicians, they're shocked when they hear that. I do a lot of workshops or in my coachings, and I Google their name in front of them. We do a live demonstration, and they're shocked about what's already written about them. So I really do implore them to take that step, get a profile on Doximity or LinkedIn, and take those first steps in terms of proactively defining themselves online. Because if they don't control their online presence, someone else is going to do it for them, whether they like it or not. And I think that's the point that tends to resonate more with the older physicians.
Right. So it used to be just knowing you went to medical school gave you a certain amount of credibility. And it still does in some circles. But nowadays, more patients are being seen by alternative health providers than there are being seen by physicians. And that means that even though regulation standards are not the same or uniform, or even thinking about being uniform in alternative arenas, even though we've highly regulated ourselves and make sure we all meet certain standards for practicing and license ourselves, we still don't have that credibility. It's being eroded. So yes, no matter how old you are in practice, you've got to be proactive about who's seeing what you've done and what they're saying about it, whether or not you're aware of it at the time it's being said online. Because like you said, it lives forever.
Absolutely. And it's just, and then you talk about the alternative practitioners, and I think they've co-opted the online space and they're utilizing it much more effectively than legitimate healthcare providers. I always talk about I have a story about the anti-vaccine movement. I think that they were much faster and much quicker to utilize that online space. And I think that is one of the reasons why a lot of those myths take hold, because they've co-opted a lot of that online space. So if you're a patient looking up for the safety of the MMR vaccine, you run into a lot of articles from these alternative practitioners who push that false connection between autism and vaccines. And that's because they've harnessed that online power much earlier and much more effectively than the legitimate medical physicians have.
So one last question. You've been doing this for a number of years. You've been online since 2004. If you could go back to where you were at a transition point, like in your third year of medical school, where you're just thinking about what you're going to do next, and you could, from the wisdom and experience that you have now, share something with yourself that might or might not change what happened to you professionally or personally, what would you say to yourself?
I think what I would say to myself, and I alluded to this earlier, is that your life cannot be 100% about clinical medicine. I talk a lot to residents and medical students, and they may not have that perspective because they're studying for the boards, and of course their life is 100% about clinical medicine. But I see the regulations that's placed upon doctors. I see the studies showing that the burnout rates both in medical students and doctors approach 50%. And I say that burnt out physicians aren't any good for patients. How can you provide good patient care if you're burnt out, if you're depressed, if you want to find a way to get out of medicine? So the advice that I would give to myself if I was in third year is that it's okay. And in fact, I encourage you to have some type of passion outside of clinical medicine. You don't want to put all your professional eggs into one basket, because if things go south, and they do go south for a lot of physicians, then you have nothing to fall back on. So have a strong support network, have a strong family system, have some type of passion that's not related to what you do every day in the hospital or the clinic, and pursue that. And it's okay. I'm talking to medical students and residents. It's okay to have interests outside of your patients. And I know a lot of doctors may not agree with that, and it may be hearsay to say that there's other passions outside of patients. But I really do believe that, because I'm a better physician for my patients because I'm not burnt out, depressed. I'm not looking for a way to get out of medicine. I'm there for my patients because I have interests outside of clinical medicine.
Right. I mean, the fastest way to lose your credibility as a doctor is to not take care of yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, who wants to see a doctor that doesn't take care of themselves?
Absolutely. So, and I think that that is one of the issues that I make an effort to bring up on my site. A lot of patients come to my site and say, I didn't know that doctors felt that way. I didn't know that physician suicide is such so impactful to the profession. And just bringing that awareness and sharing those stories has been an eye-opener to a lot of patients. And I think that we need to get patients on board and let them know that, hey, this is some of the things that physicians are fighting through, and we need your help in terms of making the workplace, the health workplace, better, because we want to take care of you, and we can't take care of you if we can't take care of if we can't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of you.
Your next step.
My show always ends with your next steps for the listeners and the viewers. With regard to this topic, what is the very next step? No matter who you are as a physician, what is the very first thing you should do when you finish taking in this broadcast?
Well, it depends on where they are in terms of their comfort level with social media. So I'm going to have a nuanced answer. So I think if you're a younger physician that is comfortable with social media, I think that you need to build that platform, because you are the future, and we need to hear your voices. We need you to impact our healthcare system. So I need you to use those social media skills that you have and make your voices heard and make an impactful change into our healthcare system. And to the physicians who aren't as familiar with social media, I need you to dip your toes in the water and be comfortable online, because I think it's a great way to connect with your patients. But eventually there will be some of you also who will get so comfortable build that platform so your voice will be heard as well. So I think the overriding theme is that we need more physicians to be heard, and we have these great tools that are available to us, and they're just waiting to be used.
And might I suggest you take a look at where you've been skinny dipping online and just put your name into a Google alert and see where you're coming up. It's really quite revealing. So if you don't know, like Kevin mentioned earlier, just Google your own name and see what's written about you. But you know what? Take a deep breath and, put on your little duck feathers and get ready, because somebody may be raining on your parade and you may need to make like a duck and let it roll right off rather than taking it so personally. Any other last words you'd like to share?
No, I think we've talked about everything I wanted to talk about. And if I can convince just one of your listeners to jump on board and start a blog or go on Twitter and make that difference in healthcare, then that's all I could hope for.
And, your site is so inviting. If you haven't been to Kevin MD and seen the page where he invites you to be a guest blogger, to post some information, he is practically begging you to submit something so he can review it and get your word out. It's the perfect opportunity to put your toe in the water. Thank you for making that available to all of us and for being such a change agent at this critical time in medicine. Nobody does it better than you, Kevin.
Oh, those are very kind words. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's more to explore at thedoctorsmentor.com.
Are you stopping at a hospital? Hello? Don't you know that hospitals are one of the sickest places on the planet? Don't touch anything in there and get out as fast as you can.